mindfulness is a very interesting term. It's become very popular, as Dr. Aisha said. One of the things about mindfulness is it's actually a relatively recent word. It goes back to the 16th century, but it was almost entirely neglected until about 1965. And from then on, you see this rise. So if you look online, you can see usage, and you see this line. It just goes nothing, and then suddenly, around the 1960s, it starts to creep up, and by 2019, it's gone way up. And there's so many things about mindfulness online. Everybody now has had some experience, if you live in America, especially in California, with this idea of mindfulness. So now they have corporations that have mindfulness. So they have people come and they tell you how to be more mindful. But what's really unusual to me is, what is your mind full of? Because one of the most interesting things about the modern concept of mindfulness, it's actually what we would call dhikrun nafs. Like you're doing remembrance of yourself. So where does this term come from? I got interested in just, where did this all come from? Well, it came from Buddhism. Because the Buddha, who I actually wrote an article in a book on Buddhism and Islam. A lot of people don't know this, but the Afghanis were actually great Buddhists. And Afghanistan was one of the major Buddhist centers in the pre-modern world. And they became Muslim very quickly. In fact, the great shrine keepers, who are known as the Barmekids, Barmak was not a family, it was actually a clan that kept the Buddhist shrine in Afghanistan. So the Baramika were actually Buddhists that converted to Islam, and then they actually helped bring all of their administrative knowledge into the Abbasid Empire. So I think it's very interesting that so many Buddhists became Muslim. And I was struck by the fact that one of the great heresiologists and Ash'ari scholars, in a book I was reading, he actually had the Buddhists as a section in sects, what they call milal and nihal, which is religions and sects. So he had the section on Buddha, and he said, if what the Buddhists say is true about this man, he must be al-Khidr, which really struck me. And so then I started researching all of what Muslims have said about al-Khidr, and the parallels between al-Khidr and Buddha are amazing. So I wrote this article called Buddha in the Quran, ? And it was actually translated into Arabic by the Ministry of Awqaf in Morocco, because the minister was very struck by the argument. Because al-Khidr, according to our tradition, was actually a prince who escapes from the palace and goes on this journey in search of knowledge, and then has ilm ladunni. It's not revelation, it's a type of enlightenment that happens. So the Buddha talked about mindfulness, and he actually has a very famous, it's called Sati Pathana, which is a lecture that he gave on mindfulness. So then I wanted to know, well, what was the word that they translated from mindfulness? And it's a Pali word, which is the original language of Buddha. And in fact, Dr. Cleary argues that in the earliest Buddhist manuscript, which is called the Dhammapada, that the Buddha actually predicted the coming of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's very interesting that the word is called sati. So I looked up sati, Pali. What did it originally mean? I want to know what it originally meant. And it meant remembrance of the sacred scriptures. So it actually literally means remembrance. So it's dhikr. So mindfulness that's been translated into English from sati is really dhikr. So then it becomes, what are you doing dhikr of? That's the question. Now we live in an age of immense distractions. Arguably, this is the most distracted age in human history. Now, what does distraction mean? Well, according to the dictionary, it means a state of being distracted. This is what drove people like Derrida crazy. But the second meaning is mental distress or derangement. Mental distress or derangement. Thank you, that helps. Mental distress or derangement. Now, isn't it interesting that we're living in one of the most mentally deranged times in human history, where people no longer even know what they are? They've forgotten God. They think that this is all meaningless. And they're completely distracted. So what are they distracted from, and who's distracting them? One of the problems with distraction is, if you're looking for it, there's plenty of people that will help you find it. And so there are all these merchants out there that are trying to advert, turn your attention toward. That's what advert means, to turn towards. So an advertisement is to entice you and to get your attention. Now, social media was designed to keep you on it. They don't call it surfing the web for nothing. First of all, a web, what do you do with a web? A spider knows what you do with a web. You capture flies, you liquidate their innards, and then you suck the life out of them, and then there's just a shell lying there on the web. Right? What's a net? Like internet? What's a net for? A net's for catching things, right? So now, as somebody who actually surfed in my younger days, one of the really interesting things about surfing is you're just trying to stay on. The wave has you. You're not controlling the wave. The wave is controlling you. You're just trying to stay afloat. And so surfing the web, you're just moving, and it's taking you. So distraction creates mental distress. The third meaning in the dictionary is that which divides attention. The word in English, decide, to decide something, comes from a word which means to cut off. Decidere. Why would decide mean to cut off? Because what you decide cuts off everything else. Once you've made your decision, you're cutting off other things. And you've made your decision. And so, people have to make decisions. Like, where do you spend your time? What do you give your time to? Now, the word in Arabic for distraction is ilha. Ilha'un. Which means to pull somebody into lahu. To bring them into entertainment, which in the dictionary is the pleasurable occupation of the mind. So who's occupying your mind? Now, what you give your attention to will determine your reality. What you give your attention to will determine your reality. What does that mean? It means that if you're always watching news about crime, you're going to think that crime is far more prevalent than it actually is, and you will be scared. You'll be walking around thinking, like Chicken Little, that the sky is falling. So what you give your attention to is going to determine your reality. And what God is asking us is to give our attention to God. Now, what is in Arabic intention? What is the attention? Well, in English, it has a lot of really interesting meanings. One of them is courtesy. Like you say, he was very attentive to me. Attentions are what a lover gives their beloved. Attention is also a word for devotion. So your attention is your devotion. It's what you're attending to. It's what you're giving your time to. So in Arabic, one of the words for it is ihtimam. It's what you're concerned with. It's your hum. It's what preoccupies your mind. It's what your mind is full of. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ja'ala humumuhu hamman wahidan كَفَى اللَّهُ لَهُ سَائِرَ الْهُمُومِ. Whoever makes his concerns, in other words, gives his attention to one thing, Allah will take care of all of his other concerns. What's that? Hamm al-akhirah. It's Hamm al-akhirah.